Hey, welcome back, fellow woodworkers. Today I've got a great video for you that I think will really help, and it's going to be a tutorial on how to apply stain and polyurethane to your woodworking projects. So grab your brushes and let's get started. Hey everyone, I'm Andy with Stone and Timber, and today I'm going to show you a step-by-step process in achieving a phenomenal finish on your woodworking projects. Now, before we dive into the staining process, which is the first thing we're going to talk about, it's important to make sure that you've prepared your wood properly. Before we start talking about staining, it's important to go back to a previous video that I had, which was actually put out last week, and that involves sanding your project. In order to achieve a flawless, beautiful finish, the first step in finishing is actually sanding. So go back and watch that video. Make sure you've sanded your boards and all your pieces and parts to your whatever it is you're making to a fine grit sandpaper. And then something I didn't mention in that video is make sure you remove the dust. You can do that by using an air hose with a compressor and blowing it off. You can get something called a tack cloth. They make them. You can get them at hardware stores. It's like kind of like a cheesecloth, like gauze type material, and it has a real sticky substance on it, and if you just wipe over everything, it'll pick up the dust. So however it is you choose to remove that dust, make sure you get the dust out of there, and you'll get a lot nicer finish in the end. Now when choosing your stain, I recommend getting a standard oil-based stain. So I'm going to use this carbon gray stain made by Woodworking. I like it a lot. I've never actually used it on hickory, which is what I'm about to put it on. So I don't know how it's going to look on hickory. However, it doesn't really matter in this. I'm just showing you how to do this, and I found a nice scrap piece that I could use for this example. So the first thing you're going to want to do is open the can. Now, you may want to use a glove because your hands are going to probably get a little bit messy doing this. I will put a glove on. And what I have is I have an old t-shirt that I tore into two squares. One square is going to be apply, one square is going to be wipe off. So, after I open that can, I'm going to take a piece of wood and use it as a stir stick, and I'm just going to gently remix the stain, and I'm feeling when I'm mixing for clumps that may have formed on the bottom. Maybe the pigment had settled a little bit towards the bottom, making sure that there's none of that down on the bottom of this can. Okay, so I have that stirred very well. Now again, as I mentioned, important to have this sanded first. So once it's sanded and dust is all clean off of here, I'm going to take my rag, I'm going to dip it in, and I'm going to wipe it on. I'm going to wipe in the same direction that the grain's running. And I'm not going to be afraid to get it covered really well. Now, I'm only going to do this top side because this is a sample piece, but sometimes it takes some planning on how to do multiple sides in the same setting because you don't want to set it down on this. So you may have to do it in two coats, one on the top side, one on the bottom side. It just depends on what it is you're staining. So once you have a good coat on there, what you want to do is you want to let it penetrate for a little bit. And always read the can and see what is recommended, but at least 10 or 15 minutes. We'll let that soak in. And then what we're going to do after that is just wipe off the excess. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit while we're waiting. Now, something I want to mention. These rags, once you use them, can spontaneously combust. Please dispose of properly. Do not just throw them in a trash can. If you do, they can build up heat and they can start a fire. So if you have a container that you can put them in that is maybe fireproof, you soak them in some water. I like to actually spread mine out, and sometimes I'll lay them right outside in the sun, not in a pile. I'll spread them out like this and just let them dry. Do not ball them up, because when it's balled up, that's when it can just build up heat. So sometimes you could hang them over something outside. I always do it outside in case it were to catch fire. I don't want it to catch inside my building. I've known of schools that caught on fire. I've heard of shops that have caught on fire, even in dumpsters. I know of a place that was throwing the rags in dumpsters, and the dumpster caught on fire because of the rags. You do not want them balled up. You want them laid out as thin as possible until they're thoroughly dry. So if you want more information on that, read the can. It'll tell you how to dispose of rags, and make sure that you're very careful about that. Okay, so I've let this soak in. It's fully penetrated. Now you're going to take a clean rag and you're going to just wipe down the entire thing, and it's going to soak up anything that didn't soak in, because if it's still sitting on the surface at this point, it's probably not going to soak in anymore. So there you can see the stain color, and that was the original. So it darkened it a little bit. I'm not sure if I would have used this color for hickory. Actually, a lot of times I don't stain hickory, but you have to be selective. Maybe have some scrap pieces, get a couple small cans and do some tests and see what you like and see what you're going for. But that is the steps in applying a finish. It's very easy to do and pretty low hassle. Now again, this rag, handle it the same way you handled the previous one, because it does have stain on it now, so I'm going to go take care of that. So once you're happy with the color of the piece you were stained, you're ready to put a clear protective finish on it. Now you can keep applying stain. It should get a little bit darker each time after it dries. You can then apply more coats. However, in this instance, we're not going to do that. So with the clear protective finish, what I'm going to show you today is how to apply a polyurethane. It's a very common finish used today. It's not the only way to finish a board, but we're not going to get into the other ones right now. So what I have here is 3 different polyurethanes. These 2 are made by Minwax. And what I have, this is a polyacrylic. And I tell you what, I really like the finish that this polyacrylic gives you. It produces a really nice finish, and I've had a lot of success with it. It's also clean up with water. So that is a big plus, to be able to clean up with water, in my opinion. This is all water-based, so you can clean up with water on that as well. It is made by Polyurethane, and it's a good finish too. Typically the water-based ones end up being a lot clearer. When you get to the oil-based ones, such as this, you sometimes will get kind of a yellowed finish over time. Not necessarily a bad thing. Still will look really nice. However, it has just a little bit of a tint to it. Now, with the oil-based, one issue is cleanup. So we'll be using a brush this time. Now with the stain, it didn't matter oil-based, water-based, because for cleanup, I'm just basically throwing the rags away after they dry out. So with the clear coat, polyurethane, you apply with a brush, and you can't necessarily do that. You know, you're going to waste a brush every time you put a coat on. So that is something to consider. However, that is a plus of the water-based, is easy cleanup. A negative of the water-based is the board can absorb that water that's in this finish into the grain. When wood gets wet, it swells. If you ever spilled some water on the surface of a board and let it sit there, wipe it up later, what's going to happen is where that water is going to be rough. By using a water-based clear coat or stain, but in this case a clear coat, you will essentially do the same thing to the boards. So after you apply this, you're going to need to lightly sand everything. Now you may need to lightly sand with this as well, but that is more due to dust settling on it and things like that. This will be primarily caused by the water in these products. So keep that in mind. Usually it's only the first coat, and then if any subsequent coats you put on later, you will not have this issue. So because of that, I don't really want to clean my brush out with oil-based, because you need to use like gasoline or paint thinner, something like that to clean it out. And I don't want to get that mess out today. I'm going to clean my brush with water. So I have these two choices. So I'm going to use, doesn't really matter, I'm going to use the Polyurethane today for this example. And something else, one other feature of these finishes is you got to look what type of finish it's going to produce. So this is a satin, so there's not going to be a lot of shine. This was also a satin. This is a gloss, so it's going to be really shiny. So there's matte, there's satin, there's gloss, there's semi-gloss, all different sheens. You have to decide how shiny you want it. So we're going to pop this open. Now, with a polyurethane, you do not want to shake the can. When you shake the can, it introduces bubbles. The bubbles can then form on the actual surface. So I'm going to take a stick again. I'm just going to lightly stir it to make sure it's mixed well. It feels really like it is. So I think we're good here. And all I'm going to do is brush this on. Now it looks kind of milky when you first apply it. I'm wiping with the grain. It has a little bit of a milky look. You can see it, I think, on the video even. Just keep wiping it in. It'll soak into that board and it will dry clear. You want nice, even strokes. One thing you want to watch, when you bring your brush off the end, or when you start, what can happen is it pushes some of that finish out the end and you'll form a drip. So always go back and check your edges for drips. Make sure nothing dripped off, because once it dries, it hardens and it's a lot more difficult to get it off. So once you've got a coat on and you've brushed it in real good, you're just going to let it dry. Read the can for the instructions for your finish you're using. This says to allow finish to dry 2 hours and then you can recoat. Now, in between coats, you're going to want to lightly sand this. Probably like a 220 grit sandpaper. And just don't use a power sander. Just lightly sand it using just a piece of sandpaper or a sandpaper block. Okay. And what you want to do is you want to lightly sand in the direction of the grain. Do not push hard. You slightly sand in the direction of the grain. Do not sand across the grain, you'll scratch it. So in the direction of the grain, hardly any weight pushing down with your hand, and all it's going to do is knock the bumps off. You don't want to sand through the first coat. You will take some of it off, there's no doubt about that, but you don't want to sand the whole way back down to bare wood again, because you could actually get into your stain if you're not careful. Once you're done sanding, clear that dust off and reapply the polyurethane. Now, once you've done the first coat and the sanding, there's a good chance you won't need to sand anymore. Feel it, make sure it feels okay. If you have to sand, you can always resand, but it's not necessarily every time. And once you let it fully dry, you're done. That's all there is to this process. Now, the great thing about the polyurethane is it also helps seal it from humidity changes in the air. We live in Ohio. We get humidity in the summer. It gets a lot drier in the winter. So the polyurethane can help protect it from those changes. It seals those pores up and reduces the effect that the humidity has on boards. So it has more of a purpose than just making it look nice and look shiny. There's some protective features as well. And that's all there really is to it. I hope this tutorial helped you get a little bit better concept of the process of doing stain and polyurethane in order to finish whatever it is you're making. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button if you want some more DIY or woodworking videos. We try to put those out once a week. If you have any questions or comments, drop them down there in the comments section and I will answer them as soon as I can. And aside from that, check out these videos on this next screen and we'll see you next time.